Welcome, everyone, to the Cross Commission podcast. I'm Ryan, joined by Jake. Safe's currently enjoying beautiful Sweden. So we'll have him back for the Crossies, but Safe's enjoying a well-deserved vacation, becoming Philadelphia's biggest HV71 fan. Swedish Hockey League. Like Peters Forsberg, I believe, played for them. Let me look up his hockey reference real quick.
Peter Forsberg's Swedish league numbers got to go crazy.
Yeah, let's see his hockey reference doesn't have his Swedish league stuff. He was actually on Modo. Sorry, not HV71.
Oh yeah.
His Modo numbers: 91, 102 points in 39 games.
It's pretty good. That's pretty good.
As a 17-year-old.
That was U20. In 90-91 he goes professional. At 17 he turns professional, has 17 points in 23 games as a professional. Then the next year at 18 he has 28 points in 39 games. And then at 20 he has 47 and 39 in Sweden. And then very quickly, his second year in the NHL, he has 116 points in 82 games. Good Lord. What a freaking beast.
Hey, man.
Remember the one year he literally didn't play in the entire regular season and he just showed up in the playoffs and he was the best player?
Yeah.
God.
My God.
He was incredible. Those Avs teams were God,
Something else,
what?
Man.
5 Hall of Famers?
Yeah, you had Forsberg, Sakic,
Bork.
Adam Foote in the Hall of Fame.
Rob Blake is.
Paul Correa is.
Paul Correa, Jesus Christ.
Team is Solani. And when they had Solani in Korea, that was the year they flopped.
Yeah.
That was a super team, and they just flopped.
Well, that was the year the Red Wings. That was the year the Red Wings. The Red Wings had the super team that year too, right? With Robitaille and Hall. Pre-salary cap was a way different beast.
That Adam Foote, who's not in the Hall of Fame, but still.
Yeah, they got Blake. They got Blake to play with Foote. So Bork played on his. Yeah. Bork played on his own pair. He's in the Hall of Fame, and then Blake played with Foote, and Blake's in the Hall of Fame. So
2001 Colorado Avalanche had Rob Blake, Ray Bork, Adam Deadmarsh, underrated guy too, Chris Drury, Peter Forsberg, Milan Hayduk. Hayduk was a beast back in the day. Patrick Waugh, Joe Sakic, Alex Tanguay.
Tanguay scored 2 goals in the Game 7.
Stefan Yell.
That's a throwback.
All this hockey talk is just because Jake and I are very happy that the Carolina Hurricanes are no longer in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Out of here. Man, this should be I would probably say, I know the ratings have kind of been, who gives a shit, but.
Yeah, who cares? They get, the NHL's getting their money. ESPN and TNT are happy about it regardless of the ratings because they got content, so it's all good.
You got Edmonton and Florida running it back.
And that was such a classic last year.
I think you probably have the most anticipated Cup final since, I don't know, maybe Chicago and Boston.
Yeah.
In 2013, or maybe
Boston, St. Louis a little bit.
No, I definitely think more than that. I think 100%.
Boston, Vancouver.
Boston, Vancouver. I think the
because last year you had Florida and Edmonton, and it actually got quite good ratings. Speaking of ratings, even though the ratings have tanked this year in the NHL,
that's what I was.
Got actually good ratings last year with a team in Florida and a team in Northern Canada.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking. Now you have the rematch factor.
It's going to take a little bit of hit being on cable. But
yes, oh yeah, that's true. So that doesn't. So it basically just takes it out of.
But I
Matter.
think real puckheads are really hyped for this, and I am too.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You've got the. I mean, the Panthers are going for back to back. You could argue, I guess, if you wanted to be a little semantic and maybe a bit of an asshole towards Tampa, the first true back to back since Pittsburgh did it. And honestly, I would say in some ways in a tougher league maybe right now than it was back then. Then you've got Edmonton going again, McDavid trying to win the cup. And he's getting
he already had his Crosby moment in Four Nations at the international level. Now it's just time the only thing left to check off is the Stanley Cup.
This is year 10. Like, I mean, it's been Ovechkin won it in 12. So if he doesn't win it this year, he's right up close to where Ovechkin was at. Yzerman won it in what year?
Was it
13?
11?
I think Yzerman was 13. Yeah, Yzerman came in 83 and they finally won it in
97.
So that was 14, 13, something like that. Yeah, so he's getting in there. Once you get to double digits, I mean, but yeah, I mean,
it's incredible how Edmonton and Florida just flip the on switch once the playoffs come. Like Edmonton, I thought was like, I don't know, Edmonton they were too banged up, they were looking lost, and then playoffs come and they're an absolute machine.
They're so weird when they're bad. I don't think I've ever seen a team as like Florida is. I think they're the best playoff team I've seen in maybe ever.
They're just built for the playoffs.
Like they just beat you. They just beat you down. Their best players are great, physical, and total pieces of shit, which is the best, combo that you want. The rest of their lineup is also big and pieces of shit.
And they had a Brad Marchand, who's also great and the biggest POS.
Like, they're just, they got Kachuk and Bennett, and that's like, pieces of shit and Kachuk's one of the best players in the league, and then Barkov's one of the best players in the league, and Sam Reinhart's a freaking 50-goal scorer, whatever the hell. And then you go down the lineup, and they got Marchand in there now, and you go down the lineup, and they got just
Bennett.
big dudes who are total nuisances.
That's the thing about this matchup too, is I like both teams. I know it's getting a little old with the teams that get to skirt the income tax.
Whatever.
A bit, but even still, Florida's so fun.
It's more annoying to hear people complain about it, honestly.
Because Florida's actually a fun team to watch.
Oh,
if this was Carolina, I'd complain, but Florida's fun.
Oh, yeah,
Edmonton's fun. I love this.
Edmonton is. I've never seen a team. When Edmonton's bad, they're horrible. They don't look like. Which mostly it's because of goaltending, to be frank.
Yeah, like half the time Skinner looks like he needs to be back in Bakersfield, and then other times he looks like 93. He looks like 1980s Patrick Waugh.
Like mostly it's because of goaltending, but also sometimes they can just be genuinely crap. But when they're good, there's very few teams who have ever dominated with offense in the way. They overwhelm you with skill, as they should. With
it was. I saw the Islanders play the Oilers back in March, and it's McDavid and Draisaitl look like they're playing a completely different sport from everyone else on the ice. It's something else to see. It's a sight to behold.
Yeah, it's Crosby and Malkin, what they had, but
faster.
The speed is that's the thing. Crosby and Malkin were not. They did it in the contest, but like the speed that they do it with is, and you could argue. I don't want to say it's better because they haven't won the cup yet, but McDavid I think is probably the best player that there's been. He's got to win the cup. But how many points he got in the playoff this year?
He has
because he had 42 last year.
He is now at 26.
Okay, so he's going to get another 15 probably on this. Yeah, I guess the only thing you could knock him for is he doesn't quite score goals. I guess his goal scoring the last couple has been a little, but nonetheless, and Draisaitl's again a monster 25. Himself. Yeah,
Ryan Nugent Hopkins with 18 points. Remember when everyone thought he was a bust?
Yeah, well, I mean, you get to play with McDavid. I think he plays he plays McDavid. Yeah, so no, yeah, it should be a good series.
You also got basketball. You got the Thunder in. You got the Knicks at least forced another game against the Pacers. So enjoy the last embers of the Pacers-Knicks series, because then what do you describe the Thunder as?
Rooting for the Thunder feels like rooting for the lawyers who defend corporations in personal injury tort cases. It feels like, or it feels like the people who root for major companies like to do well on quarterly earnings reports. It's like, man, they just do a great job at delivering content revenue for their shareholders. Like, okay, I don't give a shit. Like, they're not fun to watch.
There is a good interesting comment in one of Bomani's tweets about the Thunder. The entire unlikableness of that team is because of the AT&T commercials that got shoved down our throats the past 2 years.
That's true. Honestly, I don't think I forgot
like
about those.
What a pro like last year. What a pro wants. I'm like, okay, at least once March Madness is over, they're going to stop airing this, because usually AT&T has like an ad that they just repeat all March long and then it's gone. Then it was on every commercial break during the NBA and Stanley Cup playoffs. So it was just 3 months nonstop of that awful ad.
Yeah, really.
So what did AT&T do this year? They ran it back and had them in another annoying commercial.
Yeah, commercial. I just don't think they're not. It's not fun to watch. I don't know. There's nothing really. I don't know.
I don't know. Like, OKC's a cool market. I know they shouldn't have stole the Sonics. They probably should have gotten an expansion team instead, but it's a good fan base. They actually wear the T-shirts that are given away.
It's true.
But it's just like there's no sauce. It's they're a great team, and yeah.
I don't care. I don't care. No interest.
And they'll win the NBA championship, just like, last year's Celtics. Another team, like, yeah, they're great. And
yeah, I don't care.
Speaking of championships in New England,
this
is our first show since the crowning of national champions in Foxborough, which is closer to Providence than it is to Boston. So I know some of you guys were looking for the Power Hour. Of course, we're a bit busy. We only reason why we're a little late with doing the recording too is we have jobs, so haven't really been able to get around to recording until tonight. So thank you for waiting out on us. Before we do that, though, did you see the new Mission Impossible today, like you planned?
I did not, so I need to. I don't know when I'm going to get to see it. I got to go do a tuxedo fitting tomorrow, and then, and then I gotta. So I don't like going out and doing stuff on Sunday because I have to work the next day.
I don't like doing stuff either.
So we'll see. Maybe I'll find. Oh, Friday. Maybe I'll do Friday because in completely normal and above the board fashion, graduation. The school that my county's in does graduation at a casino.
Mm-hmm.
And the casino is by the movie theater. So maybe I'll just skip over there and go watch the movie after graduation's over on Friday.
Movie I gotta see one of these days is Friendship.
Yeah, I heard about
Eric
that.
Robinson. Yeah, I gotta get around to that one of these days.
But I do want to see the Mission Impossible. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk lax. That's what you came here for. Sorry for filibustering for 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
In typical Cross Commission podcast fashion. But at long last, for the first time in 48 years, the Cornell Big Red are the champions of D1 men's lacrosse. 13-10 victory over Maryland to crown their fourth national championship. And as I said, first in 48 years. And national championship game, I think two big stories was one, Cornell playing a Maryland-esque game and executing at it. And two, when the lights shine the brightest, CJ Crosse took over to put a stamp on his Tewaaraton winning campaign, which he took home a few nights later. So we'll throw the accolades around about putting this Cornell season into perspective. One where they beat everyone on their schedule, one where they beat trying to think, out of the 7 quarterfinal teams, they beat 4 of them.
They beat Maryland, they beat Syracuse, they beat Princeton, they beat Richmond, and they beat Penn State. That's 5.
5, the 5 out of the 7 quarterfinal teams. They beat
every team in the Final Four.
Every team in the Final Four, all the other top 6 seeds.
Yeah, man, I think there's something interesting to touch on about. We thought for a while there that we wouldn't have an undefeated champion. That was we've done 16 years without an undefeated champion, and I think we talked on the show. I think it was kind of the consensus view among fans was that there wouldn't be another undefeated national champion with the way the sport was trending. And I think increasingly it feels like perhaps that is an artifact of the 2010s, which, and this is perhaps an off-season, which we're in, but
seasons,
a off-season pod conversation. But I think that more and more it's beginning to feel as if the 2010s were a unique era of parity. And I use parody kind of loosely because it was. Still don't think it was parody per se, but it was as wide open and as I think talent was as spread out as we've kind of ever seen it in the sport. And I think that we are moving away from that more and more.
I was thinking about this the other day. Since COVID, there's only been one team outside the ACC, Big Ten, or Ivy League to make the Final Four, which was Denver last year.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And I mean, we had a run there for what I want to say 5 straight national champions, and 5 straight national champions from the ACC or Big Ten. From 2016, even still the last 10 national champions, only 2 out of the ACC and Big Ten. They were both Ivy League schools. So I think increasingly it feels like we are reaching a different point here. There's many reasons for this. I think the Ivy League in particular, just better coaches and better recruiting in the last 7-8 years. The ACC and the Big Ten, you have just different levels of the resource gap is really growing. For a long time, the conversation was, well, how do schools get to 12.6 fully funding scholarships? And that's not really the conversation anymore. Syracuse and Duke and Notre Dame and some of these programs are funding probably double that in terms of scholarships. Now you
got the Big Ten programs putting in the money from their TV deals, and now you got the Ivy League schools that really care about are starting to get their endowment muscle into it as well.
Yeah, and you have rev share for the ACC and the Big Ten, NIL, which is how these schools are funding significant numbers of scholarships. I mean, there's a between those schools I mentioned, like Syracuse, Duke, Notre Dame, that are funding. They're funding. There's a gap even between those schools and the Big Ten schools in terms of how many scholarships they're funding. So it's asking like Villanova or Hobart, who were for a long time not fully funded. I think Hobart is now. I don't know if Villanova is. Best, and I was like, oh, you got to 12.6. Great. Well, now these big schools are funding double that, and they might be funding more in the future. So I think it's a different time period. And I think we see that to circle back to my original point here in the national champions that we've seen the last couple of years. We have the last 3 years have seen an undefeated national champion that never really came particularly close to losing. A 2-loss national champion in 2023, Notre Dame, who also beat everyone on their schedule. A 1-loss Notre Dame team in 2024 that lost their 1 loss was in overtime in February. And then a 1-loss national champion Cornell team who was 3 minutes away
a 2-minute unreleasable away from being undefeated.
Potentially, yeah, having an undefeated season. So there's been, here you go. The last 4 national champions have had 4 combined losses. The 4 national champions before that had, I think Virginia in 2019 had 3. 3 losses. Yale in 2018 rather had 3 losses. That's 6. Maryland in 2017 had 3 losses. That's 9. And North Carolina in 2016 had 6 losses. So that's 15 losses from 2016 to 2019 compared to 4 in the last 4 years. And if you go to Virginia in 2021 to make it 5, I think it's still only 4. But number 1 seed has won the championship 3 of the last 4 years. Number 1 seed won the championship in the 2010s only 3 times, I want to say. Loyola, Duke, and Maryland. So you go from 3 to now 3 in the last 4 years. We are seeing a return of dominant champions. And Cornell did have was pushed in this NCAA tournament in a way that Notre Dame was not last year, and Maryland wasn't in a sense in 2022. But nonetheless, as you mentioned, beat a host of great teams, and certainly played. One wire to wire on Championship Monday, didn't trail. So yeah, return of dominant champions is, I think, an interesting story coming out of it. And I would say, I'm not going to bet on it, but if you told me, I would give not insignificant odds to another undefeated champion in the next 5 years. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think that I'd give better odds to it now than I would have certainly 5-6 years ago, where I didn't see. And the thing is, like we talked about, and I'll let you go. Sorry. A return to a more parodies or a more wide open kind of scene with the end of the super teams. But I think the story is, yes, things maybe are more wide open in the sense they were this year, because you did have a lot of teams who did have a shot at winning a national championship. In hindsight, you could argue Cornell was a cut above, and yeah, they were. But nonetheless, I think we're seeing that the best to win the national championship, you have to be. There may be 7 or 8 teams who feel like they realistically have a shot, but you're going to have to be a really great team to probably do it. And I think you see that even still next year when you look at some of the talent that these teams are bringing back. Cornell may be a bit of a different story, but it doesn't matter. But you look at these other Final Four teams. I was
thinking it's conversation for a little bit later, but like looking ahead at next year, I feel like there's, in terms of the power conferences, there's one team ahead of the pack in one of them. There's another team way ahead of the pack in another. And the other conference, you kind of have a clear cut of two teams that are above the rest. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. But you could already kind of see that it might be a titanic 3 or 4 teams next year.
Yeah, I think that it's I mean, again, we wait and see how it plays out. It always, but I think when you look ahead a bit, you get the feeling of, well, hey, 3 of these teams in the Final Four are going to bring back a bulk of their Final Four squad, and maybe even improve upon it in some ways. So there's a chance, I think, again, for a really strong national champion next year. Does that mean undefeated? Not necessarily, but I think this is an interesting thing to kind of track and follow. Is the era of the multi-super team maybe over. These teams are beatable, but I think the teams we've seen the last 3 years, the Maryland team, certainly one of the best teams of all time. Notre Dame team could maybe in that conversation. Maybe Cornell kind of jumps in that conversation as well. I would put them above many of the national champions that we saw in the 2010s. A lot of the 2010s felt like, oh, this team peaked at the right time and won the national championship. So far, the 2020s feels more like a return to the 2000s, where it was like the best, the best team. Cornell was number 1 for a vast part of the season. Notre Dame was number 1 for a huge part of the season in 24. They were one of the best teams again in 23. Maryland was pretty much wire to wire. So it's a bit of a different look, I think, is what we're seeing. And does appear, to be tilted towards the ACC, Big Ten, and right now 2 teams in the Ivy League. In Cornell, certainly, and but Princeton's also not too far behind in that mix.
So talking about the game itself, not to make you go through PTSD of what Maryland went through, but I think what was interesting with this game, if you're a student of the game and you've watched lacrosse for years, this is one of those types of games where Cornell, you're waiting on them to blow it. So if you're new to the sport of college lacrosse and you're listening to this podcast to kind of, get some color on it, and we'll discuss this more with Cornell's legacy in a little bit. But this is a type of game where things would come back to bite Cornell at the end. For a lot of this game, this had a lot of the feel of the 2009 title game, where Cornell was in control for the game. Their opposing team was playing a C- game, but they were keeping them within arm's reach. But then a funny thing happened with the fourth quarter, and is that Cornell found that other gear to put Maryland away. And I think a big part of that was the hustle plays. And Maryland was the team making the mistakes that Cornell used to make in games like this, in its history, in terms of trying to close the game out. And I think that was the big difference. And as I said a little bit earlier, it was, you were talking a lot about how Maryland can change gears. If it's a, fast-paced game, Maryland can surprise you and hang up a big number themselves. But what made this game fascinating is that Cornell did it at Maryland's pace and executed it. They were taking long possessions.
Go ahead. But I mean, this is gonna call back to what I pointed out when we did the show in the quarterfinals. We'll finish your point.
And so Cornell kind of was beating Maryland at their own game in terms of slowing the pace down, having their offense execute efficiently without that faster pace that we're used to them doing, and winning the game between the boxes, ground balls, the ride, the clears, forcing unforced errors. Well, that's a contradiction, but unforced errors by the opponent. So I'll let you go in a second, but it was very interesting to see. This is something that we're that were accustomed out of Maryland that we were seeing Cornell pull off for a full 60-minute game.
Remember when we did the show on Sunday of the quarterfinals, and I said, if Maryland, what we know about Maryland is that they have a great defense and they have a great goalie, and Maryland is, if Maryland plays, we know that Maryland can change speeds. Maryland had this ability to, when they need to play fast, they could play fast in transition. When it was a slower rock fight like against Georgetown, they could do that. But my point was, my central claim was that everyone's view was that you wanted to get Maryland into a faster paced game because that's not how they usually play. You want to get Maryland out of their comfort zone, make them speed it up. My point was, well, if you speed Maryland up and you allow the game to be this more wide open offensive game, here's what you do. You allow a Maryland offense that is, I don't want to say their weakness. In a way, perhaps you could argue it was. But nonetheless, I think Maryland finished the season top 10 in adjusted offensive efficiency. It was a very good offense for large parts of the year. You allow that offense to have success because it's a type of game where offenses will just have success. It's wide open. There's lots of space. There's transition opportunities. Maryland had those transition opportunities against Syracuse, for instance. But if you beat, as you said, if you played Maryland in a slower game in the half court and you made them earn it, the game does not become a fast-paced game, 15-14, something like that, as I mentioned, becomes who can get the stop. Which team is capable of getting a big stop when necessary to sort of break serve. When it's 13-10, a more lower-scoring, slower-paced game, the story becomes which team's offense can get on a run and kind of stretch the lead. Well, guess what happened? Cornell played Maryland in a game in, for the most part, in the tens, 10, 11, 12 goals. And Maryland got 10 goals from Eric Spanos had what? I want to say 3 goals in this game.
2 goals, 2 assists.
2 goals and 2 assists. So Eric Spanos has 2 goals and 2 assists. Everyone else from Maryland, I think, had 1 or 2 goals.
Yeah, Burks a 2, Whittier 2, Schultz, Stovall, Ford, and Kelly with 1 each.
So Maryland gets 7. Maryland has 7 goal scorers. That's Maryland's offense. That's who they've been. Depth of scoring. CJ Kurse scored 6 goals for Cornell. And how many did Ryan Goldstein score?
Ryan Goldstein had 4.
So Maryland gets goals from 7 different players. No one scores more than 2. Cornell's 2 best players score 10 goals, matching Maryland's total.
Mm-hmm.
Cornell got Maryland into the game that this is how you had to beat Maryland. And Cornell did it to perfection. They had to execute it at a super high level, and they did it because the game, and I don't want to say it's the whole game, the game became about the fact that Cornell had the 2 best players on the field. Those 2 guys, Maryland could not stop. And in that sense, when you have 2 guys like that who could, CJ Kurse had a stretch where he scores 4 straight goals for Cornell. And it's Maryland's offense had its successes, but they had to work for it. They had to, you could feel them really have to turn the wheel. And then they would do it and they get a goal and it's like, okay, awesome. We're back to within 2. Maybe we're within, they even got it to 1. And then CJ Kurse would go right back down and score.
And the thing is, too, CJ Kurse didn't score his first goal till late in the second.
Yes, and that's when the game started to get more like Cornell started to stretch it. Was the game was within 1, and then he takes over.
Because at that point, Kurse still is on his goal drought. It's clear Kelleher's banged up, and you weren't going to get as much as you usually were going to get out of him. And then Kurse scores, and you could just feel the energy in that stadium take a huge swing.
That was the key here. If this game is played 15-14, I'm not going to say Maryland's going to win, but Maryland would have had more transition opportunities. The game would have been more back and forth, and they would have had more opportunities. It would have been faster pace, so there's more possessions. But what Cornell did was perfect. they played a methodical game on the offensive side of the ball. They, as we talked about, were able to milk out long possessions. And this meant that when the game became about Cornell's elite players and Maryland's offense, they had some success. Wyatt Nuss played really well. Made some big stops, especially one. Maryland got it to 10-9, and Eric Spanos had not a great look, but a good look. He got his hands free, changed levels, and Nuss made the stop. If that goal goes in and it's 10-10, who knows? Maryland was starting to win some faceoffs in the fourth quarter. But then, as you mentioned, Cornell changed the game when they needed. Again, they had the answer at every point. When they needed to change the game in a different sort of way, they changed it with the ride. And Maryland goes, look, it's a 3-goal game, and Maryland blows 3 clears in the fourth quarter. Again, doesn't mean they were going to score on all 3 of those possessions, but that's substantial. Especially when you think about Cornell, scores that goal late in the game on the empty net to make it 13-10. That's a game that was within touching distance, and Cornell found a way to change the game through their ride. I think Tillman said that one of them Maryland lost in the sun. Not the one at. I mean, look, Maryland gets it to 10-9. They get a stop at 10. They get 10. They get a stop. I think they get 2 stops actually. I think they get a stop. They go in and have a shot. And then I think they get a second stop.
Turnover once.
They get a second stop. Yeah. They win the backup and they blow the clear, and Goldstein comes right down and scores to make it 11-9.
Goldstein was like wide open there. Yeah.
Yeah, and Maryland. Honestly, you look at that. If you go back and look at that goal, Will Schaller is kind of. Goldstein is on the wing. You have the player coming at it. The move is to cover Goldstein because he's in down low, and you go for the guy who's closest to the biggest threat there. And Maryland's defense just looked a little heavy legged. Their polls, like, that's what we talk about. What Cornell can do so well to you. I talk about especially what him playing off ball does is you make the defenders. You make them work all the time. If you are willing to play off ball and you're willing to cut and you're willing to be active without the ball, it's kind of like what the Golden State Warriors do so well with Steph Curry. Is even if he doesn't have the ball, is always moving, always trying to always setting screens. Then you're not just the long poles don't just get to stand around and wait for guys to dodge. They have to actually follow the whole time. That's a lot of miles to log. So Cornell gets it to 11-9 off fail clear. Maryland has 2 more opportunities in a 2-goal game with clears and blows both of them. The one up the sideline, the one up to 11-9 was just a bad pass. After that, they get a stop at 11-9, and then the guy loses Eric Kohler lost it in the sun. And there's the game for you. Cornell, I think, played, all things considered, I would say probably their best game of the season. I really, and I that may seem, I know they had games against Princeton, the Ivy League championship, where they put up 20 goals, beat Syracuse. I think the way they were able to you have to play great 6-on-6 offense to beat Maryland, and they did that. They played fantastic. Most of Cornell's goals came in the settled 6-on-6. They did a phenomenal job using the pick game. We talked on the show on Saturday. How many times did Syracuse set a pick for Joey Spallina on Will Schaller, and they never switched the matchup? Go look at CJ Kirst's goals and count how many come when they set a pick. They get CJ Kirst off of Will Schaller, usually onto Jack McDonald or one of Maryland's long poles, and CJ Kirst immediately, when he gets the pick off of Schaller, he is going to the goal. That was their plan. We're going to get him off of Schaller. We're going to get him a pick. We are going to really set these picks, a hard, strong pick. And when CJ Kirst gets free on the matchup we like, it's go time. And they did. Maryland, that was Maryland's defense, usually so strong against picks. That was probably the worst pick defense they played all year. Cornell was able to do. with those picks. They moved well off ball, and obviously they found. I talked about it. The matchup that was a bit concerning was Goldstein because of his speed on Canfield. We saw it on one goal, just toasted him. They put Peter Lake, the freshman, on him. Handled it a little better because Lake's got the foot speed, but still, that's a tough matchup for a true freshman in the national championship to kind of come in and guard Goldstein. So, yeah, I think that it was, I believe, and we consider defensively, I talked about could Cornell's rope unit hold up? They did. There were.
Yeah, and I have to say, the Cornell's defense, after the absolute barrage they had in Ithaca in the Ivy League championship, in the Ivy League tournament, in the Yale game too, they really buttoned up when they needed to this whole May run. 6 goals against Albany, 12 against Richmond, but then 9 against Penn State and 10 against Maryland. They buttoned up when they needed to once the NCAA tournament hit. And I think a big part of that is because of their goaltending play, obviously. But
yeah, Wyatt Nuss was terrific all championship weekend, and they needed him to be. The Richmond game, they survived the scare. He didn't have a good game against that one. They found a way through it, and then when he got to championship weekend on the big stage, he played really, really well. Did it early in that game against Penn State when they were kind of on the ropes a little bit, tasting some tough looks. He made 7 saves, I think, or 6 saves in the first quarter. And does it again here. I do think there were moments where their defense was on the ropes a little bit, and I felt that Maryland was starting to get some space in that fourth quarter, and late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter on the offense. So I thought, Cornell's defense is starting to be a little late on the rotations. That's Cornell's. I thought their shorties played much better. They were much more on the ball and physical, meeting the guy at the dodge. But their off-ball defense, which has kind of been the problem in the Ivy League, was really strong. But it was starting to sag a little bit in that fourth quarter. Maryland scored, I think, 3 goals in the fourth quarter on about 7-8 possessions. And I think there was an opening there for Maryland. They got it to 10-9. But this, again, shows you the importance of meeting the moment. Cornell's defense is a little tired, I think, and was maybe a little kind of buckling a little bit there. If Maryland gets this to 10-10, who knows? If this gets to 10-10 and your defense is kind of on the ropes a little bit, if Maryland was winning some faceoffs, so you make them play more defense, maybe this game changes. But Wyatt Nuss makes a big stop, and then from there, Cornell turns up the ride at the perfect time. They hadn't really done it all day, but they do it there, and that means that their defense didn't have to face their defense got saved 3 possessions in the fourth quarter off the ride. 3 possessions where maybe that tired legs show up, but they didn't. And Maryland's defense, conversely, had to face 3 more possessions in the fourth quarter off the failed ride. And you kind of saw their legs towards the end. It was a bit too many body blows. A really impressive performance by Cornell in every respect. Again, I think when you consider all of those factors, I think this was the best game they played.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, on the strategy end too, I think, man, Connor Buszek is what, 31 years old, I believe.
33, I want to say.
Anyway, I remember back when I was in college and he followed me on Twitter because I was doing live tweets for Syracuse and he was, keeping up on what the Orange were doing while, Cornell was playing as well as, me going to some of the Cornell games. So it's kind of a funny full circle thing. But, man, he just game planned that to perfection. It's very rare that you have a game where Tillman's going to get out-coached. And you kind of saw that a bit on Monday with how Buszek game plan with this. And that's all credit to Buszek with that.
I don't know if they got out-coached. I do think that Cornell did some good things. I mean, I think there is a lot you can give Cornell credit for this, and I still think though at the end of the day, cut through it. CJ Kerr scored 6 goals on Championship Monday. Like
Championship Monday. Yeah.
I mean, CJ Kerr is one of the best college lacrosse players of all time. Like, it's one guy had CJ Kirsten, one didn't. Like, and again, that's not the only. I'm not saying it's the only reason Cornell won, but it's a pretty big freaking part of it. If we sat here on Saturday, if I told you, okay, CJ Kirsten's going to score 6 goals, all right, that's it. Like, pack up the bus.
We start blasting off. Send my regards to Davey. Cornell's winning.
Yeah, he scored 6 goals in the championship game. It's one of the best, if not the best, championship game performances of all time. Mm-hmm. So, no, I mean, Connor Busick he's a terrific coach. Jordan Stevens, who left, just announced he was leaving coaching, I think yesterday, did a very good job with the defense down the stretch. And we kind of remember during their first run of championship weekend in 2022 is that defense that played very, very well. And obviously offensively, and Busick was the offensive coordinator before, and now he's the head coach, obviously still has a strong degree of involvement with the offense. Like this is a top 5 coach in the country. I think you could pretty kind of safely say at this point. And he could be coaching there for 30 years after this. It's pretty crazy to think about. I mean, I don't think he really had something like this since maybe Desco a little bit, Petro when he was there at Hopkins early on in the aughts. It kind of has. But
even Desco, he inherited the base from Simmons.
Yeah, I think
obviously it's hard, but I mean, when you got a program like Syracuse, the pressure's on you to sustain that, and he did a great job of sustaining it in the 2000s. But
elevating it, even honestly, argue. But yeah, I think Petro is kind of the vibe I think it gives a little bit. When Petro had been a head coach before at Cornell, in fact, but that is a bit of the kind of vibe you think of. Petro was what? I think Petro was around Busick's age when he got the job. Because Petro's in his late 50s now, and when he took over, he was in his early 30s at Hopkins. And kind of Cornell in the late when Busick took over after what Milliman had done, kind of getting the program a bit more back on track. And Busick had a part in that as well as an assistant. Petro took over a Hopkins program that was doing well, but not at this level, and not at the level that Petro took him to very quickly. And Busick similarly. Cornell was a quarterfinal team in 2018. They missed the tournament in 2019, and they could have. Obviously, 2020 we'll never know, but they certainly looked like a team that was a national championship contender, if not the favorite. They were number 1 in the country when the season went down. And now Busick's just elevated even more, winning the national title for the first time in 40 years. He's made 2 Final Fours in 4 years. So yeah, they've got something. I mean, we'll see where it goes. Saying goodbye to the best senior class that Cornell's ever had. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. The best they've had in 48 years. Those guys in the 70s were serious business, but the best senior class they've had in decades, and trying to follow just his incredible season that has kind of been a bit of a rock show in some ways all season long, with the superstars and them getting to number 1. So we'll have to see the follow of that, but 100% there's reason to feel immensely optimistic in Ithaca for years to come. The long term, maybe not next year, but it might be. But because of the stability this program he appears to have, you have an alum at head coach, and you've got a program that's feels on incredibly steady ground, and now it's going to celebrate a national championship. It's just the one thing that they've been missing. Just the only thing, really, for the last however many years.
Yeah, and I think if we bring back the seasons, the best slow burn is our seasons podcast, as we always like to kid around. But like we're gonna look back and say, wow, this team was really darn good. But remember at the beginning of the season when we were doing our preseason polls and we just kept talking into ourselves, ranking Cornell higher and higher every time. It's like, wait, maybe we should put them ahead of them. Okay, wait, you know what? They look better than them. They look better than them. And we settled upon them on third. And we're like, we were even trying to talk ourselves into putting them ahead of Syracuse for 2. And it's like,
should have.
In the end, we should have. I mean, the more we were thinking about this team in the preseason, the more we're like, you know what? This team might have something special. I mean, I went as far as picking them to win the national title in the preseason. I think you did too.
Yep. Look at us. Look at us.
Yeah, look at us.
No, yeah. When you went back and looked at last year's team and what they went from last year to this year, it was hard not to get sort of fall in love. I mean, and this was the story of their team in a lot of ways all year long, was to fall in love with the offense. I mean, you looked at last year's squad and you had CJ Kirst and you were thinking, okay, this is a guy going into his final year who is already has the best dodger in college lacrosse. And what if he has like that Jared Bernhardt kind of senior year and he just goes up one more level? Okay, he did it. Then you have Michael Long. Ryan Goldstein last year as a freshman really only started playing in the middle of the year. Ryan Goldstein, go back and look at Ryan Goldstein's first 2 games as a freshman last year. The Princeton game, 3 goals and 2 assists. The Yale game, his second career game, 5 goals. That was Ryan Goldstein breaking out. Ryan Goldstein last year put up 33 points in
9 games.
9 games. And so you're like, okay, well, hang on now. They're going to have Kirst and Long back there. They're going to add Goldstein to that attack.
Yeah, and Goldstein, 5 points against Princeton, 5 against Yale, 3 against Syracuse, 6 against Notre Dame.
Out of the jump as a freshman. And then they have, okay, hang on. They got Firth, who was a freshman. He's going to take a step. You got Kelleher again coming back for senior year. They returned their top 5 scorers and 7 of their top 9. They lost AJ. If you remember, they lost AJ Nikolic, who was going to start in that first midfield in the preseason to the entire season-ending injury. So you just kept looking at that offense and you considered it in the context of all of these pieces that other teams are losing. It's just got like, oh, wow. And they were the best offenses in the country last year. And it was like, man, this could be something really, really special. And I think that was part of it was, well, hang on. If we talk about Princeton with their offense, I think this was true all year. Cornell's offense, Princeton doesn't have CJ Kirst. They have a lot of great pieces. They don't have CJ Kirst. And you put in Goldstein Long. Syracuse, same thing. Syracuse, this great attack unit was, but then you're like, hang on, man, they don't got CJ Kirst. They don't. Cornell's got Long and Goldstein, and I think quickly it emerged this year. Man, there are a lot of great offensive teams' talent. Cornell's just a different cut on the offensive side of the ball. And then the question we had was, all right, well, the issue for them last year that cost them the spot in the tournament was the defense. Cornell's defense was bad last year. So it became, I think, a bit of a numbers game. All right, their defense needs to get to, with that offense, their defense doesn't need to be great, but it has to make substantial improvements. It did. It played even better in the tournament, but they went from being 50s in adjusted defensive efficiency to 20s. Okay, that's a big jump. And then the second one, Jack Cascadin coming back from injury. Last year was out for the entire year. He comes back and gives them elite faceoff play. And not just elite faceoff play, he's a goal scorer as well. Gives them a threat off of that. And all of a sudden it's like, well, hang on. Like the pieces here can kind of, if they come together and they improve at the rate you think, this team's got something special. And that's what happened. It played out in the way we sort of thought was I think their defense is going to be better. It was. They're going to get Kaskinen back to protect that defense a little bit and give that offense tons of possessions. And it did. And then the offense could be the best in the country. It was.
Mm-hmm.
And it all just, that's what we talk about, magic fairy tale kind of season. Everything, the best case scenario came true to this team in how you thought if they were going to win the national title was going to play out. And it came together in some ways pretty quickly, especially for that offense. And then everything else just kept falling into place more and more as the season went on. And you saw them have a spectacular year. They were number one in the country for 2.5 months in a season where a lot of teams had up and down stretches. And a lot of teams kind of fell a little bit off and then came back. Cornell was a constant right there for 2.5 months. And yeah, by the end, when you look at the teams they beat, it's maybe in the regular season we talk about they didn't quite play a gauntlet that Princeton did or Maryland did, but every test they passed with flying colors. They beat Princeton earlier in the year in Ithaca. They beat Syracuse. They won the Ivy League tournament, which had been a bit of a bugaboo for them. In recent, Princeton have been the dominant of the Ivy League tournament. Cornell does that. And then they got the big scare from Richmond. They knock it down. They win the rematch against Penn State and then beat Maryland, who's, they're the top dog in a lot of ways as a program. And they take them down. The team that had beat them in 2022 when these guys were freshmen.
Oh, yeah, all came full circle. And doing it at the same stadium that the heartbreak of 2009 happened too. And I'll get to that point and putting it into like a historical context with this Cornell program, which I'll get into about now. So I think to put this into perspective, this is a 48-year drought. Now the longest drought is Princeton at 24 years, and that doesn't really feel that long. Same with Hopkins and Syracuse are the next two at a long drought. I think right now the big drought in college lacrosse that that would be the big thing, like at the level of this, now that Maryland and Cornell have gotten their first title since the 70s in the past 10 years or so, would probably be Navy would be the big one, right? In terms of historic programs that have gone a long time.
I mean, Princeton's at 25 years now, which is, it's kind of half of what, Cornell's was 48. Maryland was 42. I feel
like get back to me at the end of the decade with Princeton.
Yeah, championship, you're looking at, Syracuse has the most. They've gone 16 years. Hopkins has second most. Hopkins is getting to 18 years, which is the same drought that they had when they won in 2005. Princeton's 20. So those are kind of those. They're a bit.
It's going to be interesting to see though, because Princeton and Syracuse feel like they're almost there. And Hopkins will see if they get a healthy year.
They do, but also Hopkins looked like they were almost there last year. Hopkins looked like they were almost there last year and then lost a big senior class, which is what Princeton and Syracuse are going to lose after this year. Syracuse, yes. Princeton's got a lot of still sophomores, things like that. So if Syracuse and Princeton don't win next year, they quickly lose we're on the come up. It's like, no, not anymore. Now you're, you got to deal with everyone else. Yeah, I guess it'd probably be Navy, which has never won the championship. In
the NCAA era.
Yeah. And hasn't been the championship weekend in
21 years now.
21 years
next year.
Yeah, you're just looking at number of NCAA tournaments. Hopkins has, look, 10 years to Hopkins feels like 20 everywhere else. Maryland's got a 47. Virginia recently won. Syracuse did break the Final Four drought this year. Carolina still pretty recently in the rear view. Notre Dame's obviously won. Duke, 11 years since they won a national title. Well, that's
going to be an interesting conversation we're going to have this offseason.
I would say. The Georgetown Final Four drought. I know they've only made one, but they're Georgetown's lost. Sorry, Hoya fans, if you're listening. It's now 11 straight quarterfinals since '99 when Georgetown last made the Final Four. So that's kind of another big, one, I would say.
But I think with this Cornell drought, it kind of felt like if we're looking at another sport comparison, I don't think it's too short to say because the NCAA era, it only goes back to the 70s. So I won't say it's like the Red Sox or the Cubs or the White Sox. Maybe more like the 67 Maple Leafs or the 70 the 70s Knicks. Kind of in that where you have a fan base that's hungry for it and has gone a long time and finally doing it. That's what it kind of feels equivalent to. You agree with that? Kind of like as if the Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup or the Knicks won the NBA Finals.
Yeah, I think it's something like that. I'm not going to make a cross sport comparison. I don't think it really matters. This was a. It's a lot like Maryland in 2017 when they finally won. I mean, this was a. If you wanted to, if you want to use the most rigorous term of blue blood, maybe they were just outside of it. But they were one of the old gods, is safe to kind of say. I mean, they're one of the original. They played in the first NCAA championship. They won the first NCAA championship. They win three of the first 7. They're still in the championship again in 87 and 88. And they have a long run there for a while in the 90s where things cool off. Then they get back.
And I think though what makes this compounds the 48 years is just the heartbreaking ways that they lost in the end. You thought, the Hopkins championship game in the 80s where they lose with 2 minutes left. The 07 semifinals against Duke, last minute loss. 09 championship against Syracuse. The heartbreak of all heartbreaks in college lacrosse. You could even say the 2013 semifinal against Duke.
Pennell senior year.
It was like 2007 all over again. So I think that plays a very big role. Is that it not to say that like they were cursed, but in terms of what it felt like was kind of like what you see in other sports where a franchise feels cursed. But Cornell, and this is going to get to my larger point, Cornell's different in a sense. A lot of programs where they have this long drought, they kind of dread of, it's been 48 years. The Cornell program, though, is different. They wear that 77, they wore that stretch in the 70s like a badge of honor. They didn't run away from the 1977 championship. They celebrated it. And they made that part of the program culture. And I said this at the beginning of the NCAA tournament. There's 2 things that Cornell University really takes pride in. It's different than other athletic departments because most athletic departments, the bread and butter is going to be the football program, the basketball program. At Cornell, there's 2 things that life revolves around. Men's hockey and men's lacrosse. And they were starving for both. They were dominant in the 60s and 70s in both sports. No titles in either since then. And a national championship in men's hockey or men's lacrosse would mean the whole world to that university and their alumni. And you saw it in the crowds throughout the tournament. The Cornell fans were showing up big time. Like this was finally going to be the deal. And you saw the support that was going on. Hopefully this translates, with their crowds in Ithaca going forward too, because you started to see the crowd start to pile more and more at the Cough. Obviously, it's not the best weather in February and March when they're playing there in Ithaca. So hopefully that translates going forward into huge crowds there at the Cough. But you definitely saw it in Hempstead. You definitely saw it in Foxborough. I mean, I keep on alluding to this with the quarterfinal. there's usually towards the midfield by the sidelines, you have, two sections of family, student section, all that good stuff. They took over the neutral seating area at Hempstead.
100%, yeah.
And like Richmond had a great student section, Syracuse and Princeton had great support. None of that was in comparison to Cornell.
Yeah.
Even at the title game, Maryland had a great crowd. Cornell was just all over the place with that fan base. Because I have to say, I know this is coming from a Syracuse fan, so we have the big rivalry with Cornell, but Cornell probably has some of the smartest fans in college lacrosse.
Yeah,
they
I agree,
know about the program history.
If you the Cornell, the best way I can say it is the Cornell fan lax section board is remarkably like level-headed and cool. like if you like of online fan, like board, like the Cornell one is one of the more like really level-headed, and I think a lot of them it's one of the cooler things when you interact with fans. It's one of the cool things for lacrosse is there's so many people who have been following these teams for so many years, but Cornell really has that. Really has fans who have been following it for, and this will get to a point I'll make in a couple minutes. Really has fans who have been following it for a long time.
And again, I think that goes back to my point. They embrace those 70s teams.
Yes.
Sweezy has a great book about the 70s Cornell teams.
Yep. What's it?
And
what's it called? Sweezy's book.
We showed Baltimore, I think.
Yes, that's it. Yes. Yeah.
So, but going to that, this is a program that just revels in its history. And they just do things different than other programs. As great as Hopkins and Syracuse and Maryland's traditions, or Princeton and Virginia's histories and all that, Cornell takes it to another level. And you think about how they, throughout the program's history, how they still celebrate Seobold and Pinnell and Teat. And you feel that connection with the alumni of the team, too. It's not just that, they play for the program and they're happy for it. They're still part of the program. It's a fraternity with Cornell lacrosse. Once you play for them, you never leave them as a program. And you even saw that with, how John Tillman was talking about the team. It's like he never left the program. Jeff Tambroni, even though he left Cornell, he's still part of the family. So you may leave Ithaca, but you never really leave the Cornell program. And I think a big part of that, too, you think about, too, with their tributes to their fallen comrades. You think of George Moriarty and the hard hat and the number 21. A lot of programs, if a tragedy like that struck, they'd have the memorial patch. They'll continue to honor them, with maybe set up a scholarship in their memory for a player and keep their legacy. But at Cornell, they made him, they didn't just honor his and keep his memory alive and have a the Game Bowl Award named after them. They made him the ethos of the program. Yeah. They made his whole character the building block for the entire program. Which, again, other programs do great things. You see it with Navy, you see it with Duke, with with guys that have fallen too soon. But with Jimmy Regan, but and Toomey and Looney, but
Brendan Looney at Navy,
but Cornell made it their entire program cornerstone. And it goes from Tambroni to DeLuca to Tillman to Milliman.
Kerwick.
To Kerwick. Milliman, and now with Bushek. It's the entire program ethos is to play like him, make hard hat plays, give all your 100% effort. And you see that too with even McEnany. from the 77 team, tragically killed on 9/11. Many athletic programs had, alumni that were killed in the 9/11 attacks. Cornell took that to another step too, with how they honored him as well. And I would say, really, in terms of remembering someone killed in the 9/11 attacks, really, it's just Boston College with Wells and Arizona State with Tillman. With
Pat Tillman was a couple years
with
later,
with the Afghanistan war after 9/11.
Yeah.
So
no, you're 100% right.
Yeah, Cornell does things different. Again, and I think one other point I'll make too, at other programs, you think about all the greats at Hopkins and Syracuse and Virginia and Princeton and all these other, and Maryland. They retire numbers, they're legends. At Cornell, you become a god. And I know this is a lot to place on a 22-year-old kid like CJ Kirst. But after this season, he's getting a statue outside the cough. That is how big of an impact he's made on this Cornell program, with breaking the all-time record, tying the single-season goals record, winning the Tewaaraton, and most importantly, winning a national championship. This is a program that, look, Seabold, Pinnell, Teat, they didn't win national titles, but Cornell loves them all the same and put them at the same level that Syracuse does with the Gates and Powells, or Hopkins does with Rabel and Harrison. Teat has now set himself up to an entire higher level. Kirst, sorry, yeah. Kirst has set himself up into an entire new level because of just what he was able to pull off this year. And I think, again, Cornell is just a different animal in how much they rever their tradition.
They are. And I mean, I think part of it is they don't have Hopkins and Syracuse especially, and Princeton to a degree, I would say, but really Hopkins and Syracuse made the Final Four for 20 straight years or whatever it was. Every year they had legendary, like, incredible players on those teams. Every Syracuse team. I mean, Syracuse goes from the Powells to, they have the Gates, and then the Powells come along like 3 or 4 years later. And even in between that, they have some pretty legendary players. Hopkins has, in the 2000s they have Rabel and they have Harrison, and then going back to the 80s they have, or the 90s, they have Terry Reardon and then Larry Quinn, and so it's like every year there's like a kind of incredible player. Del Dressel, things like that. So at Cornell, it's not quite like that. Like they have, and they embrace it. They have the incredible run in the 70s, and the 70s legends are revered. And then they fell off in a way that maybe some of their peer programs did not, but they don't. Because of that, Max Seabold is revered for helping bring the program back into the national conversation. Rob Pinnell is revered for helping contribute, getting the program back to being a Memorial Day team. I think they made the Final Four 3 times during his time in Cornell. So
9, 10, and 13.
Yeah, Jeff Teat is definitely 100% thought of so highly because of where the program was when he came in, having kind of been a bit like, I think they won 5 games his freshman year, and then they make the quarterfinals, and he helps set things up for what comes after. Now, of course, Kirst goes one step beyond those guys and wins the national championship. So, and this is what I think the program does not. It always, I think, in sports, when teams suffer, we embrace teams more when they suffer heartbreak, and we get behind teams who have lost because it allows for a great story in some ways. It's part of the it's part of the kind of arc and what we love about sports. It's very thematic. But why we then also love to see the journey and win. It feels more important when it feels like that history is a part of the team, or it feels like the gravity of what they've kind of gone through is really relevant. I think that's why Maryland's championship in 2017 was so felt so big, was because many of those players had lost the year before to North Carolina in that heartbreaker. They had been to so many Final Fours. So many players themselves had memories of getting to the Memorial Day and losing. I think I go back to like I remember when Michigan beat Ohio State in football for finally in 2022 or 21, whatever it was, the first year that they finally beat them after so many years. It was because Ohio State had occupied so much of their kind of headspace collectively, and it had weighed on them, that rivalry, losing it in such a significant way. I look at like LSU football when they finally beat Alabama the year Burrow was there. Every player on that team had lost some sort of significant defeat to Alabama. Justin Jefferson played on the team. His two brothers had lost, like national championships to Alabama. And
of course, your biggest example that you always bring up, the Washington Capitals after the Penguins. Yep.
Yeah, they lost to Pittsburgh. Them beating Pittsburgh that year was as big as winning the cup in a lot of ways. And so what I get with this with Cornell is that I think, and this is why, look, any team that wins the national championship is special. You're part of when Loyola won it, it was big. It felt like a program that had kind of been at such a ceiling finally broke through. Yale winning was a shock. I mean, consider where that program had been. But there is something to when these programs like Cornell and Maryland and Syracuse and Hopkins and Virginia win. It matters in a way because Cornell did not run from the history. They didn't try and you heard Connor Busick talk about when they asked him what it meant to bring the championship to Ithaca. He mentioned, well, listen, I was a part of a senior class that came here on the heels of that loss in 2009. And our expectation was what was placed upon us was to win a national championship. So he brought it up willingly. Sometimes you're like, oh, we don't think about that. And I don't think this team thought about 2009 by any stretch, but the program acknowledged it openly in a way that says, yes, yeah, of course it matters. All of the kind of losses that they've suffered were a part of the program's culture. Yes, it sucked and it's terrible and it was a heartbreaker, but that's part of our story. When we finally do win,
and to come full circle twice, doing it at Gillette Stadium where that heartbreaker against Syracuse was in 2009, and then doing it with this senior class after they were freshmen, losing to Maryland in 2022. Yeah. Double full circle for this program.
Yeah, and it's part of the story. It'll make it all the more sweeter when we finally do win because we suffered through this. That's kind of the perspective it seemed like they had. And so that's why championships like this really do feel, again, every national championship is special. I don't want to I don't diminish any of them. Again, when you're winning the national championship, you're part of a pretty select club in men's division and lacrosse. But for those play, like, yeah, I think you can see how much it means because, and it's cool to see that because they just did not run from the history, and they acknowledged the history as being relevant to who they were, and that I think makes it all the more pretty special.
Mm-hmm. And I had one other point. Let me see if I could get to it. Yeah, there was the full circleness, and yeah, let me just see. Sorry, real quick. Make one quick point first and see if I could re-jog my memory on what point I was going to make to wrap things up with that.
What do you want me to say?
Yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say something about but that's the point I was gonna make. Yeah, again, even as a rival fan, Syracuse is one of Cornell's biggest rivals. You just felt there's something. I said this before the Final Four. There was just something romantic about this Cornell team that even as a rival fan, it was kind of cool to see them lift that weight off their shoulder. And just, the celebration, the just absolute joy that program got to have for that.
It was a cool story, 100%. I think it's a champion that is new. Listen, you go 48 years, it's still kind of new in a way. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I didn't want Maryland to win. I really, really wanted Maryland to win. Monday freaking sucked as a fan. But I think there's probably people out there. I mean, there's definitely people out there. Lacrosse Twitter likes to make it a badge of honor how they don't like Maryland. But I think there's definitely probably people out there who would have been like, Maryland again after Maryland and Notre Dame and Virginia. So a new champion in Cornell is pretty, again, new. And I mean, obviously they won before. They're part of the club. But it's a new face in relative to recent history. And again, also 48 years. So, yeah. I think it was a fun team to watch. Many tremendous players. So yeah, awesome. Awesome season, really fun team. And credit to them. Everyone involved with the team. Hell of a season.
We had a couple other champions crowned in Foxborough. The UNC women's team runs the table with an undefeated season. Speaking of undefeated seasons, and whether or not they would get done or not, North Carolina 22-0, running through the gauntlet. That includes 2 wins against Boston College. That includes 2 wins against Northwestern. They're on the road in Evanston for the first game against Northwestern too. They had the annihilation of Florida, and then a little bit of Northwestern was hanging tight with them, but then they do what they do best and pulled away in the fourth quarter. So North Carolina with a perfect season. Chloe Humphrey wins the Tewaaraton as a freshman after a 90-goal season. So another storybook end-to-end year for the Tar Heels. I think they were wire to wire number 1 as well. I think they were preseason number 1. It was them or BC, but UNC pulls it off.
Chloe Humphrey, yeah, man. I mean, goodness. 90 goals, I think it was.
Yeah, and UNC did enough to contain 109 goal scorer Madison Taylor.
So
they're going to be around for a while. I know they lose Ashley, her sister Ashley, but Marissa White with 49 goals as a sophomore. Eliza Osborne's got 35 goals. You saw Kate Levy, the daughter of head coach Jenny Levy, had a great national title game. She's just a freshman too, so this UNC team's not going around anywhere anytime soon.
No, yeah, I mean, they're one of the elite programs, 100%. So, incredible year. Great crowds at the Women's Final Four this weekend. Lots of good stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Meanwhile, D2 and D3 finals, Tufts dominates the D3 final against Dickinson. That final score was 25-8. That was something else, the way Tufts was playing that one. And then in the D2, before the D3 title game, my goodness, the Adelphi-Tampa game. Tampa would have scored the game-winning goal, except they called timeout. Adelphi turns around, ties the game up, and then they win in overtime. So one of the more memorable national championship games there in Foxborough as Adelphi takes their second straight national championship in very dramatic fashion. And as we go into our news and notes portion, as we alluded to, it's award season. Tewaaraton winners CJ Kirst and Chloe Humphrey both take home the hardware, which no surprise at all with Kirst. By the way, I'd like to. This was probably my best year ever for preseason predictions. Please ignore the freshman of the year prediction as always. But
who'd you pick?
CJ Kirst.
No, I mean freshman of the year.
Oh, freshman of the year. Let me get Google Docs up.
Oh, you picked Ben McCarthy, didn't you, at Duke?
Yeah, I believe I did. Let me see real quick. Predictions.
He was fine. I picked Hudson Hausman, Virginia, who played like short stick D midi. Thanks, Lars. Not like your midfield needed offense or anything. Yeah, you had Ben McCarthy. Freshman of the year, we all stunk it up. Me and Safe picked Hausman. Ryan picked. Adam picked Brady Picorni in Notre Dame, who started and then was gone by like out of the lineup after like the first month of the year. No, we both had pretty good. I
had a dark horse of Harvard. They were very much feisty.
I had Colgate. I picked Matt Carwick as coach of the year, which he's not going to be. It's going to be Connor Busick. But, I mean, still. Like,
hey, that was my coach of the year pick.
Yeah, I mean, Colgate's Colgate made the NCAA tournament for the first time in 10 years. So, Carwick, if we were doing like a coach of the year ballot, he'd be on. That's interesting. Coach of the year ballot. I'd probably go Busick, Tillman, and maybe Carwick. Yeah. Oh, Chamati,
Byrne.
I like Jared Byrne a lot. I think Harvard had a good year, but I think people kind of thought they were maybe a tournament team. I would go Busick, Tillman, Chamati, Carwick, and Tams. Oh, maybe Nick Myers.
Because
Ohio State had a
maybe Myers, which by the way, Safe's dark horse of Ohio State paid off.
Did yeah?
Big Ten champs.
3 of us picked first for the Tewaaraton, which was the obvious selection. He was even if Cornell didn't win the championship, he was going to win it.
Mm-hmm. He wrapped that up by mid-April.
Yeah.
Final 4 picks. Both of us had Cornell. We both had Maryland. We whiffed on Notre Dame. Well, not really whiffed. They were the quarterfinalists in Notre Dame. I whiffed on Virginia, though.
None of us got more than 2.
Yeah, I think we all topped off at 2. We all picked Cornell and Maryland.
Yeah, and that was it. I mean, listen, I had Notre Dame and Princeton.
Yeah, we all had Notre Dame. Yeah, we all had Notre Dame quarterfinalists. You and Safe had Princeton quarterfinalist. Adam had Hopkins.
And you had Virginia.
DNQ. I had Virginia, DNQ.
Yeah. So.
Actually, before we wrap up the news and notes, transfer window is starting to spin a bit, as well as some coaching changes. So, what's on your notepad?
Yeah, Jordan Stevens has talked about is getting out of coaching. He has so Cornell. I think they maybe announced already they're going to promote Paolo Safari, but I imagine Cornell just doesn't hire outside the program, so I imagine it'll be an internal bump there. Kip Turner's leaving Virginia. He also is, I think, getting out of coaching. So Virginia needs a new defensive coordinator. And now, after a year where they missed the NCAA missed the NCAA tournament for the first time in almost a decade. And you have kind of that, everything there. Now you have the nucleus of Lars's first coaching staff is now gone. Sean Kerwin obviously took the Dartmouth job a couple years ago, replaced by Kevin Cassis. Goodness. And now you have Kip Turner going out. So UVA needs a new defensive coordinator. I don't look at this one as when Kerwin left, that was significant because he was such a key part of the way Lars turned it around at Brown, and how the style of play, and then Kerwin ran the offensive side of the ball on Lars' staffs. Lars is a defensive guy, so he had a huge hand. And I'm not diminishing Kip Turner by any means. Kip Turner, former Virginia goalie, so he played a big role with the goalies there in Charlottesville. But there's an echo coming through a little bit. But with Lars is going to have a hand to play in the defense there in Charlottesville always. So I don't know if it's a huge. I don't know. I don't know if the intrigue around the losses is with Kerwin. It was and we talked about it, and we did. We're like, it feels like Lars could go in any direction here, and he did. He hired a sitting head coach. I still think to some degree that does apply. You never Lars does things a little differently, so it feels like where he could go is a lot of different directions, and obviously it will have a lot of interest as a position because it's an ACC coordinator gig, and if you want to be a head coach, that's kind of where everybody sees where you need to be. And the last two, let me think about this. So Carolina hired Petro and then John Thompson, two former head coaches. The last 4 ACC coordinator openings have been filled by head coaches.
Yeah, Syracuse Ordina.
Virginia with Cassis, and then Thompson and Petro weren't sitting head coaches, but they are former head coaches. So this is something to monitor. If Lars tries and again goes and gets a sitting head coach, tries to beef up the experience on that staff, or maybe does he lean a little in the younger direction and hire an up and coming coordinator? But things are, I think, going to be really interesting in Charlottesville this offseason and also next year, because we talked about everything at Virginia since Lars took over have been up, and up. They made the tournament in year 2. They won the title in year 3. They won it again in year 4, and then they had a couple more Final Fours after that. This is the first time they've been knocked down a peg, and it's not going to be an easy climb again next year. There's not a Connor Schellenberger on the roster. There is Brendan Millen, the number 1 recruit in the country, coming in. I think he's going to be a fantastic player, but that's a lot to put on a true freshman. So, yeah, we're going to see kind of how things shake out at Virginia. But it's not going to be an easy climb back. That's not going to say they're not going to. I expect eventually at some point here in the next couple of years, Virginia will be back on championship weekend. But I mean, look, this year, Final Four in Charlottesville 2026 does put kind of a bit of a pressure on it, I imagine, to try and get to a Final Four. No one's played a Final Four at their own stadium in over 20 years. So there's that kind of as well. I think definitely a very intriguing next 12 months coming up in Charlottesville.
Yeah, we'll put more of a bow on 2025 when we do the Crossies, which for the first time ever, we're going to live stream the Crossies. So college lacrosse's most prestigious night of awards will be live on YouTube. So make sure that you subscribe on YouTube to the Crosse Commission, because we'll have that. But I think just to put a quick bow on 2025, we'll wax more poetically when it's Crossies time. But very entertaining year. I think the more openness of it had made for a very fun year of storylines. I think, You saw the cream rise to the top throughout the year. But you had a good variety of different styles. You had some different representation with different conferences as the year progressed. And I think all in all, a very fun year for college lacrosse and a lot of good buzz for the sport too, because of all the fun games and storylines that we've had all year. As we've said, the box office is back a bit. Good attendance throughout the year, especially with those April games. NCAA tournament with very good attendance. Television ratings were pretty good too for this past weekend. ESPN broke out the numbers. I think the men's tournament was high on both for both slots, higher than last year. I think the championship game was the highest in the past couple of years. Women's final was a little bit down compared to last year because I believe last year's was a record high, but still a very healthy number for that too. So a lot of good positive momentum for the sport after this year. I think very fun, enjoyable year and a lot of good buzz around the sport after this season.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the tweet about lacrosse. See what here we go. Men's championship averaged 567,000 viewers. It was the second most watched championship since 2013. Some of that, it's worth noting, is down to the channel. The championship has only been back on ESPN, I think, the last 4 years, I want to say. I think 2022 was when they put it back on ESPN. Before that, it had been on ESPN2 for a little bit. So that's definitely a factor. But nonetheless, good number there. The men's semifinals averaged 282,000 viewers on ESPN2. It's up 13% year over year, and it's the second most watched in a decade. Women's championship, 257,000. The women's semifinals were up 18% year over year. So, yeah, good numbers. Look, everything is kind of in context with this. Lacrosse is not.
Yeah, and also, we also didn't mention the attendance numbers for the championship game were actually higher than the semifinal too.
Yes, it was the second. It was the best championship game attendance, I believe, since 2011. I want to say it was at 32,000. So. Yeah, 32,512 was the best for a final since 2011 in Baltimore. And I think it was the first time since 2009 that the championship's done better attendance in the semifinals. So all around, pretty good stuff. Again, there's kind of context of this. The lacrosse, as far as a TV product, is not where baseball and softball are. That's just the bottom line. Your evidence for this is the coverage that the lacrosse tournament gets compared to the men's and women's College World Series on ESPN.com. Is what it is.
But at the same token, I do feel like ESPN was putting a little bit more promotion into it this year. I think the SportsCenter account was tweeting it a little bit more. Yeah, and there's a little bit more of a buzz around it. The PR piece, there's more PR pieces heading into the tournament. They had the 30-minute documentary. I
think the sport has
and they got the Rabel's Places coming out too. I know that's more aligned with the PLL, but that's some good shoulder lacrosse programming that I'm sure we're going to see nonstop every in-between game on ESPNU and ACC network next year. But it looks like that even if it's not going to get the same level that baseball and softball are going to get, they're putting more of an emphasis on the sport. I think they've been, more games on ESPN2 than we've seen before heading into the tournament.
The TV inventory is down compared to what I know. It's weird. The TV inventory is down compared to what it used to be, but I also think that as you said, I do think there's more of a promotion for the sport a little bit. I don't know. I think this conversation just is boring at this point. There's not really much left to say. It's been 20 years.
It is what it is.
It's been 20 years since 2005. Why is the attendance down? I don't know, dude. The economy crashed, and lacrosse is not the sport of the future the way it was. I mean, youth participation is still good, which is awesome, but it's not like. I mean, it's not what.
Yeah, we're never getting SEC. Yeah, we're not getting SEC schools adding it in droves like we thought it would be, or things like that.
Yeah, look, it's
is what it is. But the sport's in a good spot.
Yeah, it's doing fine. All things considered, I think the fact that look, there's a universe where we did the pods during COVID where we were like, man, this feels like it could be really bad for some programs. And the first couple Final Fours out of COVID, obviously East Hartford, reminder, true East Hartford has never been tried. But the first Final Four at Hartford not doing great. And it was like, oh, man, I don't know. I remember we went back to Philly in 2013 or 2023. I was like, this feels like a kind of bellwether, if this thing falls to 25,000 or something like that again in NFL stadium, I don't know. But it didn't. It's kept up good numbers the last 3 years in Philly and Foxborough. Maybe we'll see going back to a campus site 2026, Scott Stadium in Charlottesville that got announced. If that can draw a good number and maybe that gets some of the college campuses back involved for the hosting. So, yeah, I think by and large it's look, it was a very fun season. 100%. It felt like there were more teams in the mix and involved. As you mentioned, a great kind of array of conferences represented. You had fun games the regular season, but really the tournament delivered on what we kind of hoped. We hoped to be a tournament where, because of the close nature of the teams, we get great games. And you had some really good games in round one. You had maybe the best quarterfinal round of all time in 2020 with those three great games. And even Maryland Georgetown was a close game as well. So, yeah, I think 2025 is a season to be remembered pretty fondly. Definitely enjoyed it.
So we got all summer to look ahead and do way too early things in 2026. But as I was alluding to in the beginning of the show, going to be kind of interesting because we've talked about how the concentration of power with the ACC, Big Ten, and Ivy League. Next year is going to be kind of interesting because it feels like the Big Ten feels like Maryland and Penn State. ACC feels like Syracuse. Ivy League feels like Princeton. Are we going to get a surprise team that joins that mix, or are we kind of looking at a clash of the Titans next year? And with that, is Richmond going to be that mid-major hope that could finally take that next step towards greatness after what they nearly accomplished this season?
F it, why not? All right, here's my way too early top 20 on May 30th, 2025. Maryland number 1, Princeton 2, Cuse 3, Cornell 4. Look, you can never really rank Maryland lower than 4 because you just expect them to get to the Final Four every year. They return a good amount offensively. Eric Spanos, Braden Erksa, Zach Whittier back for senior years. They bring in Leo Johnson and Chris Lyons from Yale, so that's an offense with tons of experience that they're going to have next year and very deep. On the defensive end, you get Will Schaller back as your number 1 pole. We're going to be really deep again at the rope unit, which was a huge part of their success this year. Obviously, replacing Logan McNaney listen, it's not every day you lose a goalie that played in the championship game every year of his career. So, pretty big deal there. However, it's also not often that you get to replace a goalie with another goalie that's had a year of starting experience within your own program in Brian Ruppel. So they don't lose. They bring a goalie in that has experience and has played. So that's I think that sets them up well. I mean, like when you consider how they did replacing Ajax and Luke Weirman, I think that and McNaney is as important, if not maybe more important than those guys. I think you figured they'll be set up pretty well. I think that Maryland looks to me in line for a really, really, really good 2026. Surprise, surprise. Princeton, too, they bring back oodles and oodles of experience. Now they're kind of in the they did it. They did it this year, but now those guys are just more experienced. They do lose McAlesey, but ton of talent on that offensive side of the ball. And if that defense can get kind of talking like in the way Cornell was last year, that defense gets 10% better, they're going to be a Final Four team. Maybe even not. Like, look, they were a goal away from the Final Four this year. With that, so they'll be in that mix.
Yeah,
Syracuse,
and additionally, McKeegan keeps up what he did in the tournament. He had a very good tournament at the Face-Off X. That was their big hole for most of the season. If he could keep that going next year, that is going to be a big boon for the Tigers.
Absolutely. And you'll have goal Ryan Craddock's back for his senior year, so they should remain pretty strong there. Again, they can make the Final Four kind of just off that offense. The face-off play improves and the defense improves a bit, and the goalie play they have is pretty good. Is obviously good as well. So they can improve there. They'll be in the mix. Syracuse, kind of similar story again, but this team, a bunch of experience on the offensive side of the ball. Spallina's senior year, they do lose Owen Hilton, who give on that lefty wing. I think for Jimmy McCool back for a sophomore, or I think he's a junior, but sophomore season playing, second season playing. John Mullen at faceoff. They bring the long poles back, so a nice bulk of a good team there for Cuse. I think the real question for Cuse is defensive midfield. I think that was the big weakness for them this year, and you lose your best short stick D midi in Carter Rice, and you lose your best two-way midi in Sam English. I think that's not something that might show up for Syracuse in the regular season, but will be a big kind of fulcrum to decide whether that team gets back to the Final Four and maybe a step further, or is more of a quarterfinal team. I put Cornell 4. I'm not going to, look, be like, I don't know about Cornell next year. It doesn't matter right now. If you ask me if they made the Final Four again next year, would I be surprised? I'd say yes, a little bit, based on the nature of what they lose with Kirst and Long and Kelleher and pieces on the defensive side as well. I would be surprised, but listen, a lot of people rank the number one team number one just again to start next year. I don't do that, but I'm also you do have to respect a team that's won a national championship and what that does for a program. So because of that, even if I think Cornell might be more of a quarterfinal team next year or more of a 8 to 10 type team, I'm going to rank them 4th to start because I just don't think you can really rank them much lower than that. Richmond 5, UNC 6, Notre Dame 7, Georgetown 8, Penn State 9. This feels like a group that could be in flux a bit. Richmond, listen, they had a lot to replace after last season, and they did it beyond anybody's expectations. We were pretty high on Richmond in the preseason. Some people were not. But they now have experience coming back, and they finally have the monkey off their back in a way. They're like for real in a true sense. I think that's going to be a big story for 2026. 100% is, can Richmond take the leap to being a potential Final Four or get back in the quarterfinals? And maybe look, they were really close this year to hosting a home game. That could be something to watch for us. That'd be huge for a step for that program, so they can host a home game there at Robins Stadium. UNC 6. Listen, this is a team that's got so much talent coming back, and in an ACC where is very much in flux. That's going to be relevant, and it's always relevant across the country. You still kind of need to.
It's going to be the health, yeah.
Health, yeah. I have questions with Duffy and Petro. I mean, those are guys who have had injuries in their careers, so that's a question. And listen, this is a team that hasn't won an NCAA tournament game now it'll be 5 years from when that's the 2021 Final Four run. Notre Dame is going to be Notre Dame. They'll certainly be in the mix, but losing the entire starting attack is pretty significant losses. I think they have questions about, you mentioned this at the start of the year and you were dead on the money about it. What can you really, the Jordan Faison thing, I just don't think that's really sustainable for this program. I don't think it's sustainable for him, really, most importantly. Notre Dame football's got national championship expectations. He's a part of that. And I just don't. This is a kid who played spring football this year and then played lacrosse. And now he's going to go in and play summer and play football again. I just don't. And his numbers took a substantial hit this year. Look at Matt Jeffrey, who not as involved as Faison, but nonetheless, he's coming off an injury this year towards the end of the year. This was his freshman year. He's involved on the team. Again, but I think that's something to kind of look at with them as they try and piece together this post-Kavanaugh off. I mean, no Chris Kavanaugh gone. So the first time in 6-7 years, they won't have a Kavanaugh. And also those teams, their best teams have always included a Kavanaugh. Do I think they'll be a good team? There's so much talent that they have. Sean Light back, Richard Elliott goal. Georgetown 8. They bring in one of the Connor brothers from Colgate and potentially maybe another one. So a chance to reload on that offensive side of the ball. This is kind of just around about where they should be. I think Georgetown's at a point where you can't really rank them lower than 8 because they're like the step below Maryland in a sense, like they're going to be in the quarterfinals. But can they make that step? I'm not sure. Penn State, again, a program you got to have a lot of respect for. What Tams has done, they're always kind of going to be in the mix, I think, now. I think they've kind of graduated to that level. But losing Matt Traynor, big loss. We saw how huge he was for that team in the NCAA tournament. So I got kind of them down there, and I think they'll be in the mix. So that's 5 through. That's my top 9. Duke 10. I don't know.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think they're interesting in the sense of how many more years is Dino going to do this? Every year that passes without them being really in the mix is kind of going to feel like a year lost, I think, in a way. I also see the flips of other people where it's like, I don't know, like they were just a okay ACC team this year. I don't see much to indicate a lot different next year so far, but we'll see. Harvard 11, Army 12. Both were, those were the last two teams, or last team in, first team out. Army, I think it's worth noting how many All-Americans they had, like first-team All-Americans, and they lose a decent amount of them. Now, listen, when they lost Nick Turn, I thought that was kind of going to be a potential big blow, and they replaced him swimmingly. But a lot of talent out of that Army team in a Patriot League that's, just, sharks kind of, or ants eating each other, sort of. Kind of crabs in a bucket, the Patriot League. I got Rutgers at 13. I like Rutgers next year. I think they had a lot of young talent on the offense side of the ball. Card and Stoller back in net. They were a team that played better lacrosse at the end of the year than they did at the beginning. I think that bodes pretty well. Ohio State 14. That's a lot of senior class going out. And we'll see if they can kind of piece back together with a new group. But I just see we've seen kind of some of these Big Ten. We've got Hopkins last year, having lost so much of that senior class, and in the Big Ten, he just kind of got eaten alive. Ohio State's in that position in terms of what they're losing. Towson 15. Maryland should have another good team. The two interesting sort of names in the mix, Hopkins and Virginia, proud programs. Obviously, were big in the mix in 2023. Played that great quarterfinal game. I think there's reason for optimism for them. For Hopkins, they're kind of on the other side of where they were this year. They were the team this year losing so much experience. Now they're a team that brings back a lot of some young pieces compared to teams who are losing it. Virginia, look, it's Virginia, it's the Cavs, it's Lars, and you do have Brendan Millen coming in as number 1 recruit. Hopefully, maybe some of those younger recruits they had that got hurt last year can get healthy, and we'll see how they can kind of put it back together. But for both teams, look, they were not really close to making it this year. So long trek to go. Albany 18, BU 19, Michigan 20. I think Albany could have a really good year. I think Albany could have a really good 2026.
Yeah, they took a nice step forward this year, making it back to the NCAA tournament, getting the playing round win too. So looks like things are back on track for the Great Dane train.
Silas Richmond senior year. Really, really talented player. We know Albany's always different when they have a big superstar driving the bus. I'm not saying Silas Richmond is Connor Fields or the Thompsons, but he's a real player, man. So I think Albany could have a real look. Albany the last 2 years got the national champion in the first round. So we'll see if maybe they can what the hell is that?
My parents are putting up the awning on our backyard because there's a storm coming tonight. So that's their outside.
Sounded like someone was like revving up a motorcycle.
That's basically what it does sound like.
Man. All right. I think Albany could have a really good year in 2026.
All right. So a lot to look forward to. In the offseason with us as well. We'll be continuing to crank out content. As we said, next couple of weeks, we're going to have the 2025 edition of the Crossies, and we're going to live stream it.
Very exciting.
Yeah, we'll pick a night there's no hockey or basketball, so everyone can join in and stuff. Otherwise, thank you for all your support throughout the season. We had a blast between the podcast and the live streams all year long, so we had a ton of fun with that. So hope you can join us for the Crossies, because that'll be our one last big celebration for the season with you guys. But we do appreciate you listening to the podcast too. If you enjoyed listening to this, is the first time and you're just stumbling upon it on Spotify or your favorite podcast outlet, we hope you subscribe to us at the Cross Commission Podcast. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube at the Cross Commission. You can also follow us on Twitter at college_cross. You can also follow me at RyanMcD29.
This video is going to go up on YouTube. When this video goes up on YouTube, in the comments section, I want you first like this video when it goes up on YouTube.
Yes, like it. Smash that like button.
Smash the like button. Subscribe if you're not already. Turn notifications on for when we go live. In the comments section below the video, I want you to leave a comment with a suggestion for what type of off-season podcast you want to see. So I want you guys to give us a suggestion about something that you would like us to do a podcast on. It could be about a particular team. It could be your team. And, like where your preference at. It could be about a topic relating to like the sport of some kind. It could be evergreen type content. Go back and look at, this season. Whatever you would like to hear us talk about, I want you to put it in the comments of this video when it's on YouTube, and we will add it to our list for the off season.
Sounds like a plan. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you around with the Crossies. In the meantime, summer's almost here. I know the weather doesn't feel like it, but it is going to be June, so stay hydrated, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. President.